Bonuses are canceled, that's what he said. Right there in the middle of the damn standing ovation. We were still passing around cold pizza and half-warm La Croix from the break room fridge, everybody riding high because we just obliterated our Q3 targets. I mean 400% over forecast. Not 20, not even 50. 400%. You'd think we cured cancer with a spreadsheet the way that sales floor was glowing. My throat was raw from back-to-back calls closing that Fortune 100 account. My inbox was a murder scene of approved and signed notifications. And even Jeff from procurement cracked a smile. And Jeff hasn't smiled since 2016 when his cat came back from the dead. And then in strolls Colton. Khakis tighter than his budget, hair so aggressively gelled I swear it had its own zip code. No hello, no congrats. Just that smug frat boy lean he does when he's about to say something monumentally idiotic. He claps once. Let's gather up, he chirps. Need 5 minutes, we all go quiet. I already felt it in my stomach. The way you feel just before someone says we're pivoting or there's been a restructure. You know, corporate doom music. He stands there, all dead eyes and phony humility, and says, "You guys crushed it." No, really, you crushed it. That's why we're canceling Q3 bonuses. The room died. He did that thing where he tries to look philosophical, like he's delivering wisdom passed down by Steve Jobs and Jesus at brunch. We're raising the bar. This isn't about incentives. This is about culture. Excellence. You already proved you can do it, so now try harder. Now listen, if you're enjoying this story, and you love watching corporate karma unfold in slow, brutal motion, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give it a like. It helps us keep telling these stories the higher-ups wish you'd never hear. Plus, the team gets weirdly motivated by thumbs-ups. It's cheaper than therapy. Anyway, back to this idiot. People didn't move, didn't breathe. Jen from accounting blinked like she forgot how, and I saw Kevin, bless his middle management heart, open and close his mouth 3 times like a trout trying to pronounce WTF. I didn't say a word, not yet. Just watched him standing there with that little shark-toothed smile like he'd just outsmarted a whole room of seasoned professionals. His loafers probably cost more than our department's coffee budget, and he wore them like they gave him authority. Like he earned something. I sipped my coffee, burned my tongue, didn't care. Then I smiled, just once, not wide. The kind of smile you give when the wheels have already been turning for weeks, maybe months, and someone just handed you the last bolt to tighten the trap. I stood up, walked over. Leaned in like I was going to offer a polite counterpoint, some HR-friendly rebuttal about morale and compensation parity. Instead, I just said, "Conference room. 5 minutes." He blinked, confused. "Bring your laptop," I added, already walking away. Behind me, the room stayed dead silent, except for the distinct sound of his ego inflating. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to get angry. Not yet, because this wasn't about bonuses. This was about legacy. Power. And Colton, poor sweet nepotism-soaked Colton, had no idea what was waiting for him behind that glass door. 6 months earlier, Colton arrived like a champagne cork at a funeral, loud, unnecessary, and bound to make a mess. The founder had just announced he was taking a step back, nothing serious, just a minor health issue, stress-related. He said over Zoom while noticeably wheezing into a portable oxygen tank. Then came the kicker. I'm having my nephew Colton shadow senior leadership while I'm out. Just to observe, learn the ropes. Observe, huh? That was the plan. But Colton walked in Monday morning like he'd bought the building. Fresh off his Harvard MBA, which he name-dropped roughly every 6 minutes, usually while misquoting Sun Tzu or referencing case studies involving kombucha startups and blockchain-enhanced farm tools. His first words to me, "So you're the one still using Excel. Cute, cute." That week, my calendar exploded with meeting requests, half of them titled things like Reimagining Pipeline Synergy and Innovation Jam. He sent me a Slack message asking if I'd align my narrative with the quarterly vibe. I thought it was a prank. I responded with a screenshot of our actual performance dashboard. He replied with a thumbs up and the fire emoji. 3 days later, Carol, my right hand in ops for 8 years, was transitioned to consulting. 2 days after that, Rajiv from data was reallocated for talent optimization. By Friday, I was the only person left from the original core team who didn't speak in pitch deck riddles or wear all birds with dress pants. He started reshuffling departments like it was a dorm room draft. Brought in his fraternity brother Tate as head of talent culture, a man whose only known skill was producing a podcast about bro philosophy called Grindology. That was followed by a parade of LinkedIn influencers in training. Brand managers with ring lights in their cubicles, strategy interns who said let's table that instead of answering questions, and one guy named Rafe who openly referred to himself as a thought architect. I tried. God help me, I tried. Smiled through the buzzwords. Rewrote reports in language that didn't give me hives. Took notes during his mindshare briefings even when they involved drawing emojis on whiteboards. I had one job, keep the team functional. Protect the systems we'd spent a decade building. Do what women in corporate America have always done. Hold the damn line while the toddlers play CEO. Then came the pitch. That Fortune 100 deal? I worked on that strategy deck for 2 months straight, nights, weekends, hell. I outlined half of it on a plane using the back of a Sky Mall catalog because my laptop died and the hotel Wi-Fi was a myth. The deal was complex, multi-tiered, required actual math and industry context. I briefed Colton, prepared him with a one-pager and 3 rehearsals, mostly nodded and asked if we could make the font sexier. He walked into the pitch like he was auditioning for Shark Tank, waving his arms and saying things like agility verticals and cross-pollinated deliverables. I cringed so hard I nearly turned inside out. Somehow, by sheer force of market timing and the fact that my numbers spoke louder than his nonsense, we landed the client. Next morning, company-wide email from Colton. Subject line, victory lap. First sentence, proud to share the success of my Q3 strategy pivot. My name wasn't mentioned once. I stared at the screen so long I started seeing blood vessels in the corners. But I didn't reply, didn't scream, didn't even leak it to internal Slack like I wanted to. Because the clause was still sitting in my drawer. A relic from 7 years ago, buried in a legal appendix no one bothered to read. A clause that didn't care about Harvard or titles, or nephews with good hair and empty heads. I printed it out, highlighted it, and I waited. Let him build his little empire on borrowed bricks. He thought he was climbing a ladder. But the higher he went, the more brittle the rungs became, and me? I wasn't even climbing anymore. I was building the trap at the top. It was late. The kind of late where the janitor's playlist becomes the only thing keeping you company and even the printer sounds lonely. I was the last one in the office again. My screen glowed with the quarterly numbers, still fresh off the finance team's final tally. The total revenue line blinked back at me like it knew something. 412%. We hadn't just hit our target. We annihilated it, buried it in the backyard, and built a Whole Foods on top. Every projection, every stretch goal, every padded optimism from marketing, obliterated. The client Colton had pretended to woo into a deal. They weren't just on board. They were doubling down with expansion budgets already pending. My hands hovered over the keyboard, not from fatigue but from memory. 7 years ago, I signed my hiring agreement in this same office. Back when the founder still made eye contact, still cared about coffee chats and not just exit strategies. That contract was drafted during a different era, before the buzzwords, before the podcast bros, before the company decided culture could be bought by ping pong tables and beer fridges. I opened the folder from my personal drive. Buried under NDAs, non-competes, and a laughably outdated code of conduct, I found it, the hiring agreement. Page 13, subsection D, footnote 3. If the quarterly KPIs for division ops exceed 300% of forecast under the direct operational leadership of Margaret Davis, she shall be granted immediate and temporary strategic override privileges, including but not limited to a voting presence in executive-level decisions, pending board ratification. Signed, dated, stamped by the founder himself. I leaned back and stared at it. The clause was written back when no one thought we'd ever hit those numbers. It was a carrot, something to dangle and forget. Meant to look generous without risk. Legal fluff for a woman they never expected to outpace the models. And now, 412%. I printed the page on premium stock paper, something about the weight made it feel ceremonial. Highlighted the clause in a thick line of neon yellow. Then again, just for the hell of it. Placed it neatly in a folder with the Q3 performance report clipped behind it. I sat the folder at the edge of my desk, perfectly aligned, like a weapon waiting in its sheath. Next morning I made 3 calls, not loud ones, not dramatic. First to internal legal, just to reconfirm clause validity. I spoke with Cheryl, the last person in that department who hadn't jumped ship under Colton's reign. Her voice dropped to a whisper when I read the clause aloud. That's still in force, she asked. Yep, I said, and the KPI's 412.3. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Well, she said, you're gonna need a bigger chair. Second, I called Leonard, our old risk compliance guy, now semi-retired and drinking something brown in a cabin somewhere. I asked if he remembered drafting this clause. He did. He laughed for a full 30 seconds before saying, tell me you kept the receipt. Third, I called no one, I sat in it. Let the silence sink its claws in, because this wasn't about rushing. This was about timing. If I moved too fast, it'd look petty, vindictive. But if I let Colton climb just a little higher, let him plan just one more humiliating town hall or butcher one more policy with his startup energy, then the fall would sting more. Not because I hated him, but because I needed the company to remember who built the damn ladder in the first place. I didn't want a seat at the table because of sentiment. I wanted it because I earned it, every damn quarter, through every crisis, through every layoff he turned into a networking opportunity. That folder stayed on my desk like a storm warning. All I had to do was wait for thunder. The Monday after bonus day felt like the air had been sucked out of the building and replaced with carbonated dread. No more laughter in the break room. No passive-aggressive ping-pong matches. Just silent keyboards and the occasional cough, like everyone had collectively swallowed their pride and a mouthful of glass. That morning, I asked Danny from IT if he wanted to grab coffee before the weekly sync. He said sure, but glanced over his shoulder like I'd asked him to help rob a bank. We went to the cafe across the street, Neutral Turf. I ordered his usual for him, black, 2 sugars. He thanked me but didn't take off his coat, so I said, watching him fidget with the sleeve, "How are you feeling about last week?" He shrugged. "I mean, sucks. We worked our asses off. But new leadership, new standards, right?" That wasn't Danny talking, that was fear. Conditioned corporate fear. The kind that seeps in when you realize doing good work no longer protects you. "Just remember," I said, sipping my latte, "when someone hands you a knife and tells you to cut costs, check which end you're holding." Danny didn't respond, but he didn't defend Colton either. That told me enough. I did 5 more coffees that week. Jenna from marketing was furious. She'd already bought a plane ticket home for the holidays, expecting her bonus. She was the only one who flat out said it. "If that smug little asshat says let's pivot one more time, I'm gonna pivot him into the window." But others were more cautious. Some just blinked a lot. One even said, "Well, at least Colton's trying new things." New things like disemboweling morale with a butter knife. Right? Then, late Wednesday, a Slack message popped up on my screen. From Priya. No message, just a file. Screenshot, private channel. Channel name, Nepo Squad. Thread title, Old Guard equals dead weight. In it, Colton was waxing poetic about his vision. He said he was gutting legacy friction and disrupting senior bottlenecks. Then casually, "The bonus freeze is a necessary shock to the system. If they leave, they weren't meant to stay. If we leave." I didn't even feel angry at first, just hollow. Like watching someone bulldoze a house they've never lived in, then act surprised when the roof collapses on them. Colton wasn't trying to lead, he was trying to erase. He wanted to turn the company into a mirror, one that only reflected his ideas, his language, his friends, his damn haircut. And for a second, I hesitated. I'm not proud of it, but I'd spent 12 years here. This place wasn't just a job, it was the structure around which I'd built my life. My routines, my confidence, my identity, and now this? Toddler in designer socks was rewriting the DNA. I stared at the folder on my desk, the one with the claws, thought about pulling it out. Then I slid it back into the drawer. Not yet. That night, I sent out an Outlook invite. Q3 Performance Debrief Strategic Stakeholder Review. Invitees, Colton, his inner circle, department heads, finance, and the founder. Looped in via video under the polite excuse of reviewing long-term incentives. Subject line, neutral, agenda, vague. I needed them all in one room. I needed him smug, comfortable, standing on a foundation he thought he'd built himself. Because when you pull the rug, you want the fall to echo. But more than that, I needed the witnesses. This wasn't just about me or my team's stolen bonus. This was about something bigger: culture, legacy, respect. If Colton won, it wouldn't just be my name they'd forget. It'd be every single person who came before him, who kept this company upright through recessions, layoffs, pandemics, and boardroom tantrums. So I prepped. I reviewed every chart, every KPI, practiced my slides like they were testimony in front of a jury, and when I clicked send on that calendar invite, I didn't smile. I just breathed, because the meeting wasn't a debrief, it was a reckoning. Colton swaggered into the glass conference room 5 minutes late, like punctuality was beneath him. Aviator sunglasses still tucked into the front of his collar. Smile too wide, too polished. That manufactured kind of confidence you only get when you've never had to bleed for a win. "Margaret," he nodded, slipping into the seat across from mine like we were on a first date, and he already knew I'd say yes. "Let's keep it tight, yeah?" Busy day. Other department heads trickled in: Jenna, looking exhausted but alert, Marcus from finance, clutching his tablet like a lifeline, Priya with that silent, fire-eyed look that said I saw the Slack thread and I haven't forgotten. And in the center of the table, the screen, blank, waiting. The founder joined via video call, his face small in the corner tile. Still frail, still recovering, but with a jawline that only tensed when he was expecting fallout. He looked tired. He was watching. Colton leaned back, arms folded. "All right, let's talk numbers. Hit me." I didn't respond right away, just clicked the remote. Slide 1, revenue trends Q1 through Q3, clear trajectory, clean lines, explosive growth in the last 90 days. Click. Slide 2, client acquisition by quarter. Highlighted the Fortune 100 account. Estimated expansion value for Q4, $6.4 million. Click. Slide 3, retention rates, employee engagement, pipeline velocity, conversion improvement. Each slide slower than the last. I didn't race through it. I let it breathe like a performance, a quiet dismantling. Colton started fidgeting by slide 5. He didn't like being sidelined, especially not in a room full of people he expected to worship him. "I mean, look," he finally said, cutting in with a laugh that didn't quite stick the landing. "No one's denying the numbers. And I love the enthusiasm, seriously. But let's not pretend this isn't the result of strategic repositioning from leadership." His little circle of yes men chuckled nervously. But they didn't echo him, not this time, because facts are funny that way. Once they're in the room, they tend to suck the air out of opinions. Click. Slide 6, a table with forecast versus actuals. Projected goal, $1.9 million. Final, $7.8 million. Bottom cell lit up in bold red font, 412.3% over target. Colton's jaw twitched. I looked at him then, really looked at him. The polish was still there, but the sheen had cracks now. His voice was ready with another quip, but his eyes darted to the founder's tile. Still silent, still watching. I'm walking us through this, I said calmly, because context matters, strategy matters, and credit definitely matters. Click, final slide. White background. Black text, no graphs, no color. Just the scanned copy of my hiring agreement. Highlighted in neon red, the clause. If the quarterly KPIs for Division Ops exceed 300% of forecast under the direct operational leadership of Margaret Davis, she shall be granted immediate and temporary strategic override privileges. I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch. The threshold was 300, I said. We hit 412. Clause is activated. The strategic override is now in effect. The founder's original signature is at the bottom of the page. Dated, validated, unexpired. Silence. Colton stared at the screen like he couldn't read. One of his guys, Tate, the podcasting idiot, leaned over to whisper something, but Colton waved him off. Jenna smirked. Marcus looked like he'd just witnessed a car crash and wasn't sure whether to cheer or take notes. The founder cleared his throat. Colton, he said, voice calm, thin, but hard in a way that carried weight. Son, turn her screen off now. Colton blinked. What turn it off? But he didn't. He couldn't because the clause wasn't just a footnote, it was a knife. Legal, surgical, perfectly timed, and I had just buried it in the heart of his credibility in front of every executive he still had left. I didn't move, didn't gloat, because I wasn't done yet. This wasn't the victory. This was just the reveal. The founder's face stayed frozen in that little video tile. Quiet, unreadable, a flicker of static curling at the edges of his screen like it was trying to hold back what was coming. He looked older than I remembered. Not just tired, but thinned out, like a man who'd handed over the keys to a house and came back to find it gutted and repainted in cheap colors. But his eyes, still sharp, still dangerous. You don't build an empire without learning to spot a snake in your own bloodline. I turned slightly, not to him, not to Colton, but to the room itself, to the witnesses. I didn't need to raise my voice. The clause is valid. It was signed 7 years ago during my executive reappointment, witnessed by legal, and entered into contract records under HR file hash A27 to 441. It stipulates that any quarterly performance exceeding 300% of forecast would trigger strategic override authority for the head of division ops. I clicked back to the KPIs. Let the numbers speak one last time. Didn't need to embellish. Q3 forecast was 1.9. We closed at 7.8. That's 412.3%. I was head of division ops. I still am. Silence stretched. Colton let out a single laugh, short. Fragile? Come on, he said. This is a dinosaur clause. It's ceremonial. No one actually, he faltered. Glanced at the founder. I mean, we've evolved past that kind of legacy red tape, right? The founder didn't respond. I mean, sure, technically it's in there, but so are half a dozen clauses about equity dispersion during IPO, and we're not IPOing, so it's like still silence. He tried again, but this time to the room. You all get this, right? I mean, we're not gonna append the chain of command over some dusty piece of paper from the pre-Agile era. Let's be adults. No one spoke. Jenna leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Priya folded her hands in her lap like she was watching a courtroom drama and waiting for the verdict. Marcus looked down at his shoes, and the founder, he didn't even blink. Finally, he spoke. But not to me, not to the room, just to Colton. Son, turn her screen off. Now. 4 words. No emphasis, no anger. Just cold steel delivered through a screen that might as well have been a guillotine. Colton froze, his smile vanished. Shoulders slouched just a hair. It was subtle, only someone who knew the signs would see it, but it was there. The kind of body language shift that happens when a man realizes the air he's been breathing was never his to begin with. He reached for the keyboard, hovered, but didn't press a thing. Uncle, he started, trying to spin. I think we need to realign on, the founder cut him off. No, just that, a single syllable, a damn hammer. Then his eyes flicked to me, not warm, not congratulatory, just measured, like a man doing mental math about what's left to salvage. I remember that clause, he said. I insisted on it. Said we needed a safeguard in case the next generation got stupid. He didn't say he didn't have to. Colton was already crumbling under the weight of that one word, stupid. There it was, the shift. The room no longer belonged to him. Hell, maybe it never did. But this was the moment when even his own reflection would stop believing he was in charge. The founder looked back to the screen. Margaret, he said, continue. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a rebuke. It was a removal dressed as a meeting. And I was no longer a department head under siege. I was the one holding the ledger. And the bill had come due. The door closed behind Colton with the softest click I've ever heard, but it felt louder than any tantrum he could have thrown. He hadn't even been escorted by security, just 2 internal HR reps and a freshly printed packet labeled clarification review, like that would soften the blow. They'd waited until after the founder signed off and the room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that follows a detonation. Nobody said a word for a long time. It wasn't a celebration. There were no high fives, no slow claps, just the low hum of fluorescent lights, the faint tapping of Marcus's pen, and the lingering smell of burnt coffee from Colton's untouched mug. Then Priya cleared her throat. So, what now? Eyes turned to me. I didn't reach for the head seat. Didn't slide over Colton's abandoned laptop or grab the floor like I was staging a coup. I just leaned forward, folded my hands on the table and said, we focus on Q4. No drama, no distractions, just results. The founder hadn't hung up yet, he was still watching. Listening, Margaret, he said, the board's prepared to offer you interim executive authority, operational lead until we finalize direction. You'd report directly to no, I cut in gently, thank you, but I'm not interested in the title. He paused. The others looked puzzled. I glanced around. I've never needed a title to lead, I just need room to fix what got broken. I slid the folder across the table. On top, a 2-page proposal, simple, direct. One request, full discretion over Q4 operations, including personnel restoration, resource allocation, and performance strategy. No red tape, no committees, just trust. He read it, blinked once. Fine, he said, it's yours. That was it, not a promotion, a restoration. Not for show, for substance. By the time I walked out of the conference room, my heart wasn't pounding anymore. No adrenaline, just the solid thud of something real clicking back into place. The next day I sent 2 messages. First to Carol, my former right hand, laid off during Colton's first efficiency sweep. The second went to Rajiv and Data. They both responded within 5 minutes. Name the day, and they did. Walked through the doors like survivors returning from exile. No fanfare, just quiet nods and sleeves rolled up. The air changed. It wasn't instant, but it was noticeable. Meetings ran tighter. People stopped looking over their shoulders before speaking. The whiteboards filled up again, real plans, not buzzword hieroglyphics. Jenna pulled me aside that Friday and whispered, it's starting to feel like us again. I didn't smile, not because I wasn't grateful, but because I knew better than to celebrate too early. Fixing culture is like fixing plumbing. You can't just mop the floor and pretend the pipes aren't leaking. I walked the halls every day that week, not as a boss, as a builder. I checked on teams, asked questions, answered them. Pulled spreadsheets myself, no filters, no narrative realignment, just work. Colton's shadow still lingered. His podcast buddy Tate quietly resigned on Friday. No announcement, no goodbye email. Just a wiped desk and a calendar that now had gaps instead of stacked ego fests. I didn't mention it to anyone, didn't need to. By the second week, the operations Slack channel changed its tone. Less groaning, more building, less survival, more momentum. I knew the work wasn't over. Colton was gone for now, but the damage he left behind wasn't. Trust takes time. But the cracks were sealing, piece by piece. And every time I sat back in that conference room, one with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the ghost of his fake leather briefcase still imprinted on the table, I felt it. Not power, not revenge. Just balance restored, quiet, strategic, mine again. The first thing I did wasn't fire anyone. It wasn't send a snarky company-wide memo or order Colton's name scrubbed from every document like he never existed. No, I opened Excel. It's always the invoices that tell the real story. Not the memos, not the all-hands calls, the money. That's where the rot lives, and boy, did Colton's vision leave a trail. I started with consulting because if there's one thing a nepotism prince loves more than buzzwords, it's hiding bad decisions behind third-party logos. Took me about 20 minutes to find the invoice that made my eyelid twitch. $18,000 Strategic Inspiration Sessions, X3, submitted by R. Ray. Solutions. R. Ray, Rafe Anderson, otherwise known as the thought architect from Colton's dorm, who once spent an entire off-site retreat explaining how synergy is a spiritual state. The description line read, cross-functional unblocking, culture realignment ideation, and proactive imagination scaffolding. Translation. He talked in circles for 3 hours and billed us more than our entire Q3 team-building budget. And he wasn't the only one. There was a $12K charge for mindset recalibration, $9K for brand detox, and a bizarre $5,600 line labeled liquid brainstorming enhancement, which, as it turned out, was kombucha. I didn't get angry. I built a folder, every padded invoice, every questionable retainer, every sudden vendor switch Colton greenlit without so much as an RFP. I documented, cross-referenced, and flagged discrepancies in red. By the time I was done, it looked less like a spreadsheet and more like a crime scene. Then I slid the whole thing to HR. No commentary, no drama, just the facts. And to their credit, they didn't drag their feet. 2 days later, Tate's resignation was followed by a handful of other quiet exits. A few were offered new opportunities elsewhere. A couple went without ceremony. No one asked too many questions because everyone already knew the answers. Mood in the office didn't shift overnight. But you could feel it in the way people walked to meetings, straighter backs, less eye-rolling. Someone brought donuts on Thursday and people ate them. You don't realize how much tension poisons routine until you're watching someone laugh near the copy machine and it doesn't feel like rebellion. And the whispers started, not the gossipy kind, not anymore. The other kind, the reverent kind. Did you hear what she found? She didn't even raise her voice. She's fixing it, for real. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, that would have been easy. Satisfying, sure, but small. I wasn't here to balance a personal score. I was here to repair an institution. Because for all the performance metrics and CRM dashboards, this company had something deeper worth saving, memory, legacy. It had been built on late nights, on actual trust, on people like Carol and Rajiv and Jenna who cared whether the numbers were real and whether the culture didn't make you sick to your stomach by Friday afternoon. Colton had tried to bleach that out. Paint over the rust with influencer speak and imported bamboo planters. But culture doesn't come in a box, it's built, slowly, with intention. I wasn't just restoring old systems, I was updating them. Quietly but with precision. Quarterly review templates were revised to reflect team collaboration scores. Vendor policies were updated with mandatory sourcing reviews. Finance embedded automatic flagging for any single-line invoice over $5,000 with the phrase strategic in the description. I didn't put my name on any of it. Didn't need to. By the third week, one of the newer hires, a soft-spoken analyst named Kyle, stopped me in the break room. "Hey," he said, nervous. "Just wanted to say it's been better lately." "Like way better, thank you," I smiled. Not because I needed the praise, but because he noticed. Because when the junior staff start feeling safe enough to speak, that's when you know the cleanup is working. No press releases. No executive reshuffles splashed across LinkedIn. Just reform, quiet, disciplined, and permanent. And every time I walked past the wall where Colton used to hang his branded motivational posters, "Disrupt or die, hustle harder," I noticed they were gone. No one asked where they went. No one replaced them, and I didn't need to. The message was already loud and clear. The founder's name lit up on my screen at 6:07 a.m., a time reserved for emergencies or legacy shifts. I just poured my coffee, still in sweatpants, hair tied up, laptop propped against a stack of Q4 reports I'd been reviewing since dawn. The man had impeccable timing. Or maybe he'd learned the value of early calls from watching how I ran this place without him for the last quarter. He didn't open with small talk. "Margaret," he said, "I need your eyes on something." 20 minutes later, I was in the main conference room again. No Colton posters, no fake agendas, no interns Instagramming their oat milk lattes in the background. Just the real players now. The founder's face popped onto the screen again, smaller this time, background blurred. Diminished maybe, but not weak. This was different from last time. No judgment, no power plays, just respect. He nodded once, then opened the call. "This merger is with an East Coast firm bigger than us in tech, smaller in distribution. But if we integrate right, this sets the stage for a global logistics footprint. Their board's been briefed, CEOs joining in shortly." I reviewed the deck silently. Financials were solid, synergies real, not just PR fluff. No loose strings, no frat boy fingerprints until the founder cleared his throat. "They insisted on one condition," he said, "your involvement, full strategic oversight, from your team only." Before I could respond, the screen split and there he was, Julian Monroe, the CEO of Ventral Dynamics. Ivy League sharp with the kind of face that didn't waste words. He scanned the room quickly, like a man taking inventory. "Morning," he said. "Let's get straight to it." He turned his eyes directly to me. "We're excited to work with Margaret's team. No offense to anyone else, but that was our line in the sand. Her numbers, her infrastructure, her call." I heard a chair squeak across the table, just barely. Colton. Apparently he'd been reinstated last week as a gesture of goodwill. A bridge builder title, liaison to the merger. No decision-making authority, no budget. Just enough rope to keep him from crying foul to the board. He cleared his throat like he was prepping a TED talk. "Well, I think," Julian raised a hand, "we've already asked for his removal." Colton froze mid-breath. Julian didn't flinch. "It was in the preconditions we sent Tuesday. Clean handoff, no redundancies, no distractions. We'd rather delay 6 months than build around his influence." The founder said nothing, just nodded, slowly, deliberately. Colton's mouth opened, then closed. For once he read the room correctly. He stood, gathered his notebook, and left, no tantrum, no defense, just the sound of his footsteps down the hall growing softer with each one. Julian turned back to me. "You ready to sign?" I looked around. Jenna was beaming quietly. Rajiv gave a slight nod, eyes steady. Even Marcus, king of cautious optimism, had leaned forward, pen in hand. I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't proud, but because this wasn't pride. This was ownership. Quiet, earned, complete. "I'm ready," I said, and I signed. No fireworks, no speeches, no marketing hashtags, just ink on paper. Just legacy secured. The founder lingered after the call. "Just me and him now. You rebuilt this place," he said softly. "No," I corrected. "I just cleaned up after the guy who tried to burn it down." He smiled, the corner of his mouth twitching like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. He just logged off. I sat alone for a few minutes. The conference room was still, peaceful even. The skyline outside hadn't changed. Same old view, but everything underneath it had. And not a soul needed to clap, because the work was done. And the company, it finally belonged to the people who built it. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.